Okay.
So yeah, thank you for Vicky coming to the privacy talk this time. So I'm very glad to have you on board here to make a conversation regarding the like a privacy or also the blockchain experts here. So
Yeah,
I'm
thanks so
very
much.
good to honored to have these talks this times. So let's
Yeah.
move on.
Okay.
So the Vicky, please introduce about yourself, the backgrounds, and also the your researching expertise in the universities. Please share.
Sure. Well, thanks again, Kohai, for inviting me. It's really a pleasure, and it's been a pleasure to meet you. So a little bit about me. I'm an associate professor of archival science at the School of Information at the University of British Columbia. And archival science is really a traditional field that is looking at the trustworthiness of records. So
Mhm,
when you think of archival science, you probably think of archivists who are classically trained to preserve old records in archival institutions. And that is actually how I was trained. That's my background. But over the years, of course, archives and the records we create have become digital. So I began to specialize in digital records and record keeping. And I worked for many years before becoming a professor. And one of the areas that I worked in was IT security. So I became knowledgeable in IT security and combined that with my knowledge of archives and record keeping and digital archives and record keeping. And then when I joined the University of British Columbia as a professor, I started to specialize in research that was at the intersection of digital archives and record keeping and IT security and risk management and so on. And so that's what led me really towards researching where I am to now today in blockchain technology. And it was the perfect sort of coming together or confluence of all of the past professional experiences and training that I had that led me to that point. And it really was, it started in 2016 when I happened to be reading an article in the Financial Times that was about the government of Honduras. They were going to start using a blockchain for their land registry records. And I said, I think sounds really interesting. I think I better learn some more about this. And so that's when I started to research and study blockchain technology. So that's kind of like a fast overview of how I got to running,
mhm,
setting up blockchain at UBC, which is the research and education
mhm,
cluster focused on blockchain technology at the University of British Columbia, which we set up in October 2016.
mhm.
And yeah, and I've never looked back. I mean, now I'm just like full time focused on researching blockchain technology and all the many different issues, including
Mhm.
privacy, that are related to this very interesting technology.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for your about your great introduction with you. I'm also betting on the blockchain. It's almost 2 years here, which is the part of the future technologies, the infrastructures to be connected each other, the individual processing, which is the very important to taking actions, not just relying on the specific the trusted parties, we can make it ourselves. So that's a very great philosophies for us. So
Yeah.
I want to move to about the like your activity in British Columbia's. So
Hmm.
you are part of the blockchain research as well as the ICE code in the British Columbia's. I
Yes.
saw that in the websites, the reputation ICE code is a very the human or liberty-based approach in new technologies.
Hmm.
So please
Right.
tell us about the about ICE codes, about the policies, what the philosophies that you are working on the research.
Yes. So you're right. The School of Information takes a different, and the iSchool approach in general takes a different approach to developing technology than maybe you would take if you were in engineering. All of these approaches are really valuable, but the differentiator with the iSchool approach is that it's very human-centered. So we always start with looking at technology as human-centered, and also as the term is socio-technical. So a technology isn't just about the technical components that that we create and that work together, but it also is implemented in a social environment. The technology itself and the way it's brought together expresses human and social values that we can bring into it. So, for example, if we're talking about, and we have been talking about COVID-19 tracking and tracing apps, you could develop a COVID-19 tracking and tracing app that really didn't matter if it respected people's privacy or not. The main focus was just on gathering up as much data as you could, and making sure you could track down as many people as you can to manage public health. That would be one approach to designing that technology, which would be very effective from a public health standpoint, potentially, if people trusted it enough to use it. But what we learn sometimes is that people don't always respond to technologies the way that we expect them to. So it may be that people don't use your tracking and tracing technology because they're afraid of surveillance, or they're afraid their privacy would be breached, in which case you might then design a technology that is more respecting of privacy, based on considering what the actual user values and how they might respond to your technology. So that's human-centered design. And that's the approach that we take in the iSchool. The School of Information is a very human-centered approach, understanding that technologies express and human values, and actually they construct the reality that we all live in. And so when we design them, we better be thinking about what kind of reality we do want to live in.
Yeah, that's very unique to me, because the in the blockchain or many new technology space has not seen the specific human-based building up the architecturing. I guess that this is the very important when it comes to the dissemination of the new technology into the societies. So right now, especially, a lot of the people is like building up the technology first, but the thing is coming back to us, like because the human is using the technologies. Back to the history, we are experiencing the same things, like automobiles or other manufacturing and many things. It's been seen in the same things in the internet as well. So I think this kind of the approach is a very, very important that you are working on iSchool. So
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, the next question is about the more specific one. You're working on the blockchain, the UBC, where is also the very excellent job. I founded the two papers on your research. One is data sovereignty for industry sovereignty. Second is the building a trust, like protecting the privacy. So could you give us the brief introduction of these two papers?
Yeah, so, well, we're just, this is just my research. I'll just say that blockchain at UBC is, we're a multidisciplinary blockchain research cluster. So I really have to acknowledge all the wonderful work that my colleagues and fellow faculty and students and postdocs are doing. And so there's so much research that's going on that is related to the School of Information, but also our computer science department, our engineering faculty, our business faculty, our policy students and researchers. So this is like maybe just a tip of the iceberg of all the research that we're working on, but let me focus on these two projects that you picked out, because they're projects that I'm actually involved in. So the first one is data sovereignty for indigenous sovereignty. And I actually have a PhD student right now, which this is his whole focus is how can we use blockchain technology to really, again, express the values of Indigenous peoples. And what will that look like in terms of the design of the technology that might differ from the expression of values for non-Indigenous peoples? So this whole Data Sovereignty for Indigenous Sovereignty project is looking at that and saying that, and it's all part of, an Indigenous sovereignty movement that recognizes that records and data actually can be used to control people and can embed power. So if you think about identity documents, right? Most of our nation states, like Government of Canada, Government of Japan, they issue us with identity documents, birth certificates, passports, and so on. And that shows that we have certain rights and entitlements within that particular nation state. But for many peoples around the world, including Indigenous people, the power of the nation state and the issuance of these kinds of documents that show, that identify you in society, has been a way in which they have experienced oppression. They've experienced abuse within society. Look at the Black Lives Matter movement and what is happening with Black people. So people experience society in different ways, and it's not always as positive as other people. We all experience it differently, and some of us come from, and I consider myself one of those people, very privileged places. So the Indigenous sovereignty movement is really about taking control of data and records as a way of empowering the Indigenous people themselves. Now, with traditional technologies, the traditional record keeping databases, what's happened is, like, the Canadian government has, information about treaties and who's a member of particular treaties and identification information, land rights or logging rights or fishing rights. That information has been maintained traditionally by the Government of Canada. And the idea is that with these traditional centralized database technologies, that's that model of the government sort of holding that data and maintaining it is, it lends itself to that. But with technologies like blockchain, and in particular self-sovereign identity technology, which is enabled by blockchain, the power to control and have custody of the data can be pushed out to people themselves, and that includes Indigenous people. So they can take custody and control of their data, and they can decide how they're going to share it, how they're going to use that data, and through having the control over their own data, become empowered to make decisions about, for example, we had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission here in Canada about some terrible atrocities where Indigenous children were taken from their families and they were put into residential schools. And so they were removed from their cultures and they were forced to not speak their own language and not live according to their own traditions. And many of them were also abused in many different ways. And people gave testimony about how they suffered under this regime. And some people wanted to share their testimony and have it be part of, the public record, have it be part of history. And some people didn't want to share that testimony at all, or maybe only wanted to share it with family members. And there was a big debate about, should it be public or should it be private? But we don't necessarily have to choose. If we give people self-sovereignty, they can decide. Some people may choose to make it open. Some people may say, I'm only going to allow certain people to see this information. It's for me to choose who I share it with. So this is why we're looking at this particular issue of Indigenous sovereignty, because we see such potential to empower, for the empowerment of people who, you know, have not been empowered within society, to become empowered through control of their own data. So that's that project. And it's very early stage because, as I say, my PhD student, he's really just in his first year. But we have been working with Indigenous partners, like our partner Chinook X. And that work has been going on for about a couple of years, exploring this particular issue. So it's an ongoing piece of work, and we'll see where it lands. The other one is building trust and protecting privacy. This is really a broad area. There's a lot of my research that touches upon this, but it's really around the question of privacy does promote trust in society. We need to know we have privacy in order to be able to trust to use certain services. And I'm thinking, you know, particularly about my research in healthcare. So I may not want to use a telemedicine service or a health review service if I feel like the service that I'm going to use is going to result in a data breach, or the particular service I'm using is going to take my data and then sell it to a third party without my authorization. I actually call that, I have a name for that, which draws upon Bitcoin and blockchain cryptocurrency. I call it data double spending. So I give you permission to use my data for a particular purpose, like maybe to access a service, but then you turn around and you double spend my data without my consent for another purpose, like you're, you know, selling it to a third party for advertising purposes. Or, you know, we heard like about Facebook and selling to organizations that were targeting people for political reasons, like in the Brexit vote and the US election. That sort of, I call that data double spending. So what I think we need to do is build greater trust that there are technical mechanisms, but also laws and regulations that prevent that. You know, that I should be able to know what my data is going to be used for, where it's going to be stored, how it's going to be used. And so there needs to be that transparency, and the technologies that we use and that we deploy to manage the data, they should be designed in a way to facilitate that. And then that's again why I'm looking at self-sovereign identity and blockchain technology, because it is a technology that can help us achieve that. So my research is focused mostly in the healthcare space right now, but not exclusively, because healthcare is one area where it is really sensitive data, and we want to make sure that we are protecting privacy to build trust. So those are two projects that I have going on, and I'm going to be doing a research talk on July 21st, which is Blockchain at UBC has a monthly research talk. And I'll be giving a really detailed overview of the particular work that we've done in a healthcare project. The platform that we built is called MyPDX, and we've actually done some focus groups with members of the public to ask them, what do you think about this platform? And we've learned a lot through that, and we've also identified some technical gaps in the platform, so I'll be talking about that at that session. So if you want to tune in for that, you can do that.
Sure. Yeah, please share me the details that I'll also be spreading in my communities, which is the very latest topics to consider to make sure that, I guess, you said is a trust is a very important to who believes you. They also double spending is a very good words. We can imagine that a lot of the data is been unintentionally they used to by the third party to something which is they need to be reconsidered at these times.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's very good point. We want you to move to this question to the government, right? I think in COVID-19, a lot of the government is try to collecting the data to surveillance where it happens, pandemics. Of course, it's very important to comprehend the status of the citizens, where they're living, where they're working on. But I think we need to be paid attention how coverage the government is doing at this moment. In the
Yeah.
sense that we need to learn from the Canadian government, I guess. They are like a president. It's been stated to the movies. They try to strong to protect the consumer rights and
Mhm.
privacy. So, which
That's
is a very great announcement. So, how's like a Canadian government is working on this situation to protect the citizens' privacy regarding the
mhm.
privacy commissioners, data protection act, anything that works there.
Right, right. So Canada, Canada is an interesting country because we have, of course, a federal government, but we also have provincial governments that also have, they legislate and provide regulations in the area of privacy, and they also are the ones that are responsible for delivering health care. So when you're looking at what's going on across Canada, it's not a homogenous picture. It's very diverse. So I'll just talk about what's happening first at the federal level. So there was an announcement, I think it was June 18th, when the announcement was made from our Prime Minister's office that the federal government was going to support a contact tracing app, or an approach to contact tracing, that leveraged the Google Apple API. You may be familiar with that
Yeah.
API that was built. And you'll remember that during our COVID-19 witness seminar that you participated in, that where
Mm-hmm.
we brought experts from around the world, including you, thank you very
Mm-hmm.
much for participating in that, that the Anne Cavoukian, who was a former privacy commissioner of Ontario and is well known globally as the developer of this notion of privacy by design,
Mm-hmm.
spoke very favorably about the Google Apple API, feeling that it really had been developed with there many privacy protections and so on. So the federal government, working with a Canadian company called Shopify, which had developed an application that leveraged the Google Apple API. They've since made it, they've said that they'll make this open source. Like they don't want to be sort of the owner of the app. They want to make it available. What the government has decided to do is to trial that out in Ontario. So the Ontario government is going to be giving that app a try. But they're also, at the same time, they have asked a Canadian company, BlackBerry, to take a very detailed look, to do a privacy impact assessment and a security review of the application. That app is going to be rolled out in the province of Ontario,
Mm-hmm.
but because Canada is the provinces each tackle things in their own way, the province of Alberta had, even before this, they had developed another app called AB Trace Together.
Mm-hmm.
And AB Trace Together also uses Bluetooth, but it wasn't using the Apple Google API.
Mm-hmm.
It was it was developed pre-release of the Apple Google API, so before it was developed. And excuse me. So they ran into some difficulties because the Bluetooth wouldn't run in the background because of the way that the devices have been set up and configured. So when you get a phone call or something like that, the connection would be interfered with. So there's some concerns around the accuracy of the data and so on. I don't know whether they will continue to use AB Trace Together or whether they will pivot towards the Shopify, Google API, Google Apple API app
Mm-hmm.
for future, or whether they will even roll out anything at all. I mean, that's, it's definitely a choice in each province as to how
Mm-hmm.
they actually approach this. I think there's some convergence towards a more standardized approach within Canada, but where that there's consultation going on between the public health officials and various officials as to what a standardized approach might look like, but there's
Mm-hmm.
no definite agreement at this point. In British Columbia, we haven't rolled out any contact tracing app.
Mm-hmm.
There are discussions about maybe doing some trialing of something that like the Shopify, Google, Apple API in a very limited localized basis to see how people respond to it, to see how
Mm-hmm.
it works. So I think we remain very cautious about the use of these apps in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly the governments are being very respectful of the people's concerns around privacy,
Mm-hmm.
excessive government surveillance, not
No.
using technologies that would be, would enable that. So lots of consultation is taking place, and very cautious movements towards using this technology. I would say in Ontario, where they're trialing it, that's where the numbers of cases have been highest,
Mm-hmm.
and where you can justify, right, there's a number of cases, the risk is higher, the public health concerns are higher, so it makes more sense to use an app like this. Whereas in British Columbia, as I was saying to you before we started, the number of cases, we're only getting 13 new cases a day here
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
at the moment, and we've already started to open up. So, that level of contact tracing doesn't require, rolling out making a huge technological investment,
Mm-hmm.
because you can track down, the number of people that are related to these cases still using manual methods. So the governments are looking at all of these things. They're looking at the risk level, the numbers of cases to be tracked, how effective the technology is, what the effect is on privacy and how people are responding to it. So that's what's happening here in Canada. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds very great. And also the privacy concerns is the one of the topics
Yes.
to to take enough people to use in apps, because in Japan is also we have a launch the apps. It's almost 6 million people to download it, but the problem is that we need to go active to be connected each other, to take and assign the signals to send it to the health authority, which is the requirements. We need to take in enough balances, the privacy, the utilities, to achieve the purpose and goals. So this is the very important.
That's
Uh, yeah, the next question is about under the COVID-19, is there any voluntary or civic activity in Canada to work for, like any engineer team has been associated to work for the public services, the government, the developing any technology? Is there any good case there in Canada in these situations?
Yeah, I mean, there, excuse me, I'm aware of a project. There have been projects at McGill and projects at U of T,
Mm-hmm.
around developing approaches to COVID-19. Even like, I think the one at U of T was even focusing on a self-sovereign approach.
Mm-hmm.
At the University of British Columbia, where I'm based, which is what I know best, we have an annual, what we call blockathon for social good. So every year we decide, we think about, well, how can we contribute to the public good through the development of blockchain technology? And so this year, of course, it was natural to focus on COVID-19. And so we had a design and it's been like a hackathon for blockchain technology. And so we focused on COVID-19 use cases. So students came up with designs for a couple people did supply chain management of PPE, personal protective equipment, and some did payments for, we have this payment that is going out to people who have lost their jobs or have not been able to find work, because of COVID-19, because they've had to stay home from their jobs. A lot of people have been affected, so we have this payment. So students came up with a way to issue those payments effectively. I don't think anybody did contact tracing, but they did do sort of like back to work certificates as well. So the students came up with really great designs. It's really been up to the students to take those designs forward into projects like the COVID Credential Initiative project, or other projects. And I'm not sure that the students have really decided that they're going to do that. I think they just maybe decided that they didn't necessarily feel like they would want to take it forward at this point. But I'm sure that if they might see an initiative that they wanted to join and they could contribute their ideas to. They know about CCI and they've been encouraged to participate. So I leave it up to the students. They're self-sovereign, so they can decide what they want to do, and then they know that we are here as faculty to support them if they want to take it further. But so there are universities doing lots of different things around this, and of course my students particularly are working on the project that we've built, which is the health wallet, which could be used. It could be used for some of the COVID-19 related use cases. We haven't necessarily designed it with that in mind, but it could be used for that. And we may get involved ourselves in some of these projects that are going on to support those efforts. So we'll wait and see what happens there. As I said, there's nothing within the province of British Columbia. There's no app right now, so we'll see what the government decides to do there. Sounds
very good. Thank you. So let's move on to the last questions. This part is your own expertise. The future information management is a key part of the governance, I guess. So I think that it's in Toronto has been suspended the project from the Google, which is the very city project. I think it's very important to make the data transparencies, also accountabilities. It's a kind of the responsible for the users who provides the data subject. In that cases, so what kind of the information transparency they also to public service provisions is a requirement from the opinion in general.
Yeah, so it's an interesting paradox in a way that to have privacy, we also need transparency. And this came out in the COVID-19 witness seminar we ran as well. So in order for people to be able to trust that their information that they might share through these apps is really maintaining their privacy, they need transparency about how the apps actually work, where the data is going to be stored and for how long and how it's going to be used and processed. All of the protections that will be around the data. People need to know that and understand it, because without that transparency, they're not going to trust. They're not going to trust that they can really share their data without, some maybe private information that could endanger them or embarrass them getting out, or without the government maybe creating some great record store that they would use to, invade the privacy of their citizens, or somehow, maybe control what their citizens are able to say or discuss in public. And that's always a concern in a democracy. We want to maintain our freedoms to speak and say, and talk about the issues that are important and hold our governments accountable. But, if they have information that they could threaten us with, then that obviously would not allow us to have that freedom, our civil liberties. So transparency is necessary for all those reasons. So people can trust the app and they'll use it and it's effective. And also so that they know that the way that the data is being handled is still protects their civil liberties, and they can still trust that their rights are protected. We're very fortunate in Canada to live in a country where we do have our civil liberties. We have the ability to speak freely and gather, except for, when it's dangerous to do that because of COVID-19. But yeah, we have a lot of freedoms, but by the same token, I don't think we take those freedoms for granted, because it's too easy to look around and see places where people did once have freedoms and then those freedoms were lost very suddenly. And so you're always aware that, these are human rights, but in some ways we're very privileged to have them. And so we want to maintain that and protect them.
I see.
So yeah, so I hope that answers your question there. I mean, in terms of my specific research that I did before, I think the project that you were referring to is a project that I had done that looked at analyzing Twitter data. This is before I got into blockchain technology, and I was working on another technology called visual analytics. And that is really doing, understanding data and analyzing data in a way that leverages the unique cognitive capabilities of our visual system. Because we humans are engineered to be able to see visual patterns in data in an amazingly rapid way. And so visual analytics leverages that cognitive intelligence and is a technology that's designed to, create a human machine interface that allows for data analysis. So we harvested Twitter data relating to the 2014 World Cup in Brazil, because you might remember that there were a lot of protests in the streets around the World Cup. Brazilian people were really upset about the amount of money that was being spent on the World Cup and so on. And so the question was really around trust in government. What was it that was causing people to protest in the streets? Was it really related to the World Cup, or were there deeper reasons why people were protesting? And when they were protesting, who were they really protesting against? Were they protesting against politicians, or they were protesting against corruption or state government and so on? So we created this project which we called We Feel Fine, looking at like, how do Brazilian people really feel about their government and trust in government? So we found some interesting things through that project. When we analyzed the data, we built a visual interface to analyze the data. And we found some interesting things, like at the time people were saying the protests were related to the World Cup and they had to do with, transportation and so on, and the money that was being spent. And we found, specific things that, politicians, Dilma Rousseff at the time, who was president, had said that really upset the Brazilian people. And it was related more to fairness. It was more a question of fairness. And people saying, I don't mind you spending money on this World Cup, or I don't mind you spending money on really anything you need to run the country, as long as that money as long as the benefits of that money is evenly distributed. So it was a question of equality. And we see this all around the world where people don't mind if, we have to spend money on, for example, public health and protecting people from COVID-19, but not if like all the benefits of that go to a certain group of people, if it's only benefiting a small group of people, but where the benefits are evenly spread and we all also suffer equally, we all have to be shut down. And it's not just, so where the problems are occurring is where we've realized that, maybe some of the shutdown and the economic measures that have been, the economic impact hasn't been evenly felt. Like here in Canada, it's clear that a lot of the frontline workers, a lot of the people, in essential services that, for example, we're working in care homes for old age care homes, are people who are new immigrants to the country. They tend to be, in the lower income bracket. They might be from ethnic minorities. And so the economic impact has not affected everyone equally. So anyway, this research in Brazil, we used this analysis of Twitter data to uncover some very similar dynamics in why the protests were happening around the World Cup. And I think that the takeaway here is that, people around the world, it shouldn't really be surprising. People will accept hardship. People will accept, that we have to make sacrifices, but it should be that it benefits everybody. We don't make sacrifices and it shouldn't be just that, you people over here, you have to make all the sacrifices and suffer hardship so that we people over here who are already privileged and in power can continue to enjoy our privilege and power. That does not make for a happy, healthy society. And that's where you see people starting to protest and people rising up and saying, no, that's not acceptable. We're not going to take it. So making sure that societies remain inclusive, have equality, that benefit everybody in society, continue to be something that's, very, very important for stable, healthy societies. So that's the moral of that story.
Yeah, that's very awesome. Then it was very impressive with me. That's because the evidence-based, citizen voice is very important to make the decision processes. When it's come to the new technology, like social media, the social data is new kind of the factors to make a political processing. So in Canada is how the government is collecting the data, interactive with the citizens or people who worries about the political decisions, the political philosophies, or any good activities to interact with the people is living in countries.
Yeah, well, so in Canada, public consultation is part of the way that the government, does gather this information about citizen voice. Like, what does the citizen want to say? So there was a new public consultation announced just recently around technology and Canada's digital future. So the government is doing public consultations. Because the project that I worked on was focused on Brazil, I'm not actually sure, and I've moved away from visual analytics and into blockchain. I'm not actually sure if the government is using the advanced analytic techniques that we developed at the time, or they were advanced at the time. They're more commonplace now. I'm assuming so, but I don't know. I don't have any insight into that really. But I think that there is much to be gained by using those kinds of technologies and techniques, because you can see at scale. Oftentimes we have to go out and we have to do surveys with people, and people respond to the surveys, and that's great. That's one source of collecting that data. But sometimes the surveys will tell you what people are thinking at the time, or what choices they think they'll make,
Mm-hmm.
but the day-to-day actions are maybe different. And analyzing Twitter data gives you a different dimension. You know, it has its limitations for sure, which we talk about in the paper that you're referring to, but you get a different take on things. So you get people's day-to-day conversation and exchanges. The thing about Twitter is it tends to be, the exchanges tend to be kind of more antagonistic. We know that from Twitter. It's often a place where people just take snipes at each other and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And sentiment analysis, which we use for the analysis, is it's come a long way since we used it, but it's still not very good at picking up on humor. You know, so when you're doing the analysis, somebody might say something in a joking way, and the sentiment analysis algorithm would probably interpret it as them being serious, like they actually, you know. So there's still a lot of work to do. I have a colleague at the iSchool who actually does work on sentiment analysis and computational linguistics, who's done amazing work to extend the capabilities of sentiment analysis. So I think there's a lot of room to use that technology, but the government has to be committed to talking to its citizens before you can even start to use that technology, which thankfully the Canadian government is good at doing.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing that you were speaking throughout these interviews. That very impressive with me. So yeah, lastly, I want to ask you about any message to Japan or the Asian listeners who want to reach out their opinion and ideas. So could you give me any message to them?
Well, I'm always really cautious about, you know, I don't want to be prescriptive, like you should do this or you should do that. So no messages about that. Just a message of, you know, as a democratic country like Canada, just a message of solidarity with, we're all, you know, trying to respond to and figure out how to continue as healthy democratic societies in the face of this enormous health challenge that we face globally. And it affects all people everywhere, of all different types of, in all different types of, you know, geopolitical states. And so just a message of solidarity that through collaboration, you know, through the kind of collaboration that has been expressed in the CCI initiative, for example, you know, the kind of collaboration you showed by participating and coming to talk to my witness webinar, you know, me coming to talk to you and share what I know, that collectively through all of the contributions that we can make and the knowledge that we share and the conversations that we have, I have hope that as humanity, we will be able to overcome this pandemic and, you know, we'll be able to have a brighter future. But I think at the same time, we can learn some important lessons from this time too. Like we know that we've seen that even though it's affected our own health and our own, you know, freedom to move, the environment has been very well, like the sustainability effects have been good. You know, the environment has had a bit of a break from human pollution, and we've seen in Canada, in where I live, I've seen more wildlife coming out. I've seen, you know, the growth, the plants are growing and green. So I think we shouldn't also forget, you know, some of the good things that have happened as a result of COVID-19 and some of the lessons about leading digital lives that we've learned. So there's, you know, the word crisis, you know, also conveys opportunity as well as danger. So although this has been a dangerous time and a time of crisis, I hope we can look at it as a time of opportunity as well, where we as humans, we can make choices for ourselves about what kind of future we want. And it's based on reflections that we've done during this time. Yeah.
Thank you for your great message to the audiences. So, which is the times to collaborate in each other to find the best solutions to put before the thinking. So, yeah, thank you for having this time. So, great appreciate it, Vicky.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. And yeah, I look forward to staying in touch. Thanks, Kohai.
Thank you. See you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.